how children learn language, and the best we can do is to hold the child along. It's the child's language. It's not our language. The child is born endowed with language learning capacity. That's the greatest message of the greatest linguist of the 20th century. I'm talking about Noam Chomsky. We don't have to teach language. All we have to do is to listen to the way children talk and then work with them and expand the horizons of the child's talk. All pedagogues in worthwhile institutes of education in the world have offered us that advice. Listen to what the child is saying and don't repeat it, but expand it in your response. And the child will then say more, and you will also say more. And this is how a relationship with the child will evolve. And since teaching is a relational activity, language is the focus of our consciousness when we are talking to children, so that we offer an enabling role. Enabling role in letting the child explore his or her own language. This is the language she is brought to us from God, from mother, father, and everybody else. So teachers, it's not just attitudes, which of course have to change radically, because teachers are today in our system those who muzzle the child's language. Children come talking in grade 1 and stop talking by grade 2, 3, and by 6 they are finished. And then you have to ask them, you have to prod them, you have to repeatedly ask them to say something. And by the time they come to me in the university, they are finished. We have to literally give them rebirth. Many of them probably find it possible to be reborn as language users, but the great Indian system destroys most of them as language users. And no wonder creativity is so rare in terms of in language use and so on. Literature is, of course, it is another great healer of this destruction. When we read literature, something in us gets triggered and we feel like using language again. So all forms of literature, but particularly oral forms of literature, like storytelling, are very important means. Music is another very important healer and of this destructive role of language education in our Indian system. So I can't emphasize more what music can do to rebuild that bridge between sound and meaning and emotions and our minds. And so music education in early grades and onwards is very, very important component of language education and language learning, although it's seen as some kind of a peripheral outcast of the curriculum. You know, the music teacher is the least paid, is invited to do something when a VIP comes to school or an annual function or something. But the music teacher is actually a language teacher, because she's dealing with the heart of language and so on. Nothing much can be done unless we have very good music program and so on and so forth. And I would like to close these remarks by going back to reading. Now, these areas, reading and writing, are both extensions of language, and we know for a long time in human civilization they were not necessary for everyone, but now they are. And so it's very important for us to treat them as universal rights. It's a right of every child to become a reader and to have access to lots of literature to read. And hence, yesterday I had mentioned that perhaps a program can be worked out with NCERT, which has had a reading program, or some other institution. There are many today who are offering something or the other. We tried to put together 40 books for children to become self-readers, self-learning readers in the early grades 1 and 2. And that series called Barkha is very easy to translate or adapt with new illustrations and so on. But it's a graded reading series of 40 books in a package. And our experience in one district, Mathura, where NCERT worked in 5 blocks in some 60 villages over a period of 3 to 4 years, has been absolutely phenomenal. We started with a benchmark survey when most children could not read. And 3 years later, the reading levels have shot up. It's like magic what has happened. NCERT created reading corners in every school, every village primary school. Not much of an expenditure, but a bit of expenditure to create a pretty corner where books could be displayed, where children could just come and sit anywhere they like, on floors, on stairs, on chairs, or wherever, and read what they wanted. And the experience has been absolutely great to see how such a corner or a classroom library can be developed. Of course, we will need a program to put together some good creative writers who can write for children without being preachy or didactic towards them, who can use their daily life episodes and their own way of thinking to construct stories and offer them something which is visually well illustrated and so on and so forth, would go a long way in creating a reading culture. I think it's also important from this point of view that while we work on teachers' own fundamental understanding of what is language and what is language education, we also make them readers and create for them a body of writings and literature which they can read to both enjoy themselves as language users and literature readers, but also to learn more about this matter. Again, a lot of excellent writing is available from around the world, no dearth of that. But what has not happened is its entry into teacher training. Teacher training is another word, and completely another world. That even the best artists work, best of fiction, best of cinema based on fiction, hasn't entered the world of teachers, and hence teacher training, and hence they remain dry. They remain. The world of language and literature is supposed to make you a what is in Hindi we call a saras person. It makes our jivan, our life, full of rasa. But if we ignore that wealth and don't put it into teacher training, all we do is to offer them very dry, cut and dry manuals, which give them modules or steps to do this and that. That doesn't inspire, and certainly it won't start the fresh thinking that needs to be done, because something has to be invented here. Yes, something has died here. There's no doubt about it, and the stench of that death has been growing and rising for a long time, certainly more than a century. We have lived with that stench of death, of great traditions of language use, links between language and culture. Today you call a person, you have to call 3 times, and the caller doesn't know how to call, and the listener doesn't know whether he should respond quickly. And some very basic things have happened which have broken up how to pay attention in offices, not just in the lower level, middle level staff, topmost staff. If you're talking to a minister, talking to a senior officer, you have to repeat your point 5 times before you get the point across. And still you have to say, sir, my point is, which means that the great officer, though he did an IAS from a coaching center, doesn't know what the point of my presentation was. And I have to tell him after the presentation what my point was. Surely something has died here. And we have to give the old due respect and then start afresh. And I would strongly recommend this National Focus Group on Language Learning, which was part of the National Curriculum Framework, as a text to begin talking to teachers in workshops or in whatever mode this begins. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you very much.
And I'm sorry, I did speak to bilingual issues. I think that's an offshoot of it. Bilingualism is one of the most natural things in the world. Multilingualism is one of the natural things. Why it doesn't work and why it gets so belabored is because we don't understand what language is. So both languages suffer as a result of that. Whatever our languages are, or 3 languages or 5 languages, that's not the issue how many languages we want to learn. What language is what we don't understand when we pursue these programs. And hence, it's not just the case that English is not learnt well, Tibetan also may not be learnt well. Its great capacities may not grow in each child precisely because the child has been made to think of Tibetan as a subject. Which all languages are subjects in our classroom, and once they become a subject, they cease to serve the function of vehicles for all learning. That's the meaning of language across the curriculum approach, that every teacher is ultimately a language teacher. If every teacher became conscious that the language I'm going to use has to be clear, has to be understood, has to go across, has to be dignified, has to be democratic and all that, then the science teacher is also contributing to language learning. So this question